Hey, welcome back to my Scary Tale channel. About this video, the sea provides for itself and always has a system in which the organisms that reside there give back to the biome long after death. This is the very purpose of a whale fall the phenomenon, in which the corpse of said mammal sinks to the bottom of the ocean to provide food for other aquatic creatures throughout the slow process of its decay. At the beginning of the year, I and a team of fellow marine biologists spent the better part of 3 months studying a whale fall that we'd named Titus. Our interest in it being that the carcass had settled in far shallower waters than expected for such an event. Consensus was that disease had spurred the creature to veer off course from its migratory paths, where it had eventually died stranded, yet not alone resting amongst the many organisms that would make their pilgrimage to feast on its remains. For the first few weeks of our study, this process went as expected. The arrival of various species of sharks, crustaceans, worms, and seals, documented by submarine and remote-operated vehicle expeditions. It was only when Titus's state of decomposition seemed to slow, even to have halted entirely, that our team noticed something had changed with the fall. Changed, or had been wrong with it since the beginning. Status so gradually revealed that we were only aware of it when it was too late to extricate ourselves from its grip. The animals that came to Titus to eat no longer left its side. Their mouths joined with it in perpetual union. In spite of this, the corpse no longer diminished, appearing much as we'd found it. An open cavern cut in its left side, through which the ribcage gleamed, one eye eaten into a mangled pit, the other staring out into the deep, as though it was still capable of sight. This inexplicable stasis fascinated and alarmed us more with each passing day. Must be some parasite or disease, my colleague Demetriou theorized. Whatever killed the whale is causing this new behavior in the scavengers. They're not eating the body, only performing a behavior that resembles it. That's why there's less breakdown than we would expect to see after death. Another of the team, Reynolds, said, "It's more than that. The whale's grown." The rest of us laughed, thinking that she must have been working for so long that her eyes had begun to play tricks on her. There's something hypnotic in the sea, even when you're on land, merely thinking of it. It's what drew me to the work to begin with. The fascination of things even experts have only just begun to understand, and likely never fully will. You get caught up in it all sometimes. I know I have before. "I'm telling you the whale's grown," Reynolds insisted. "About a foot in length, not much, but it's undeniably bigger than it was. And it shouldn't be. You don't have to take my word for it. Look at our most recent footage and compare it to the first images we took at the start." She was right. And how we'd all missed it, I can't properly explain. We'd all put the same amount of time and effort into the study. Should have seen the alteration as she did. Then, perhaps we had, and had simply not wanted to consider the implications of the fact. The weirdness of it all. Parasites, Demetriou said again with satisfaction. They're bloating the tissue, making it look like it's expanded. Reynolds shook her head. Number, it's not it. You can see that none of the animals around the whale have died or even lost significant weight, and what little they have shed isn't from starvation. Then what? I asked. I already knew what she was about to say, but it was so impossible that I didn't want to voice it myself, to suggest it as a reality. "Titus is feeding on the animals attached to it," said Reynolds. "Don't ask me how, but it is. It's not the whale," Demetriou insisted sharply. "It's dead. Something inside it is preying on the scavengers maybe, but why would you think that it's the whale itself?" Miss Reynolds couldn't answer, but there was a conviction in her eyes I knew could not be argued with. "We'll send the ROV out there for another tissue sample," I said. "Then we can analyze it and see what's changed." To prove who's right, I wanted to say, but didn't. The other members of the team agreed that this was the best approach, being that it was the least invasive option and safest for all involved. Reynolds, however, wasn't satisfied with the suggestion. "I want to get closer," she said. "I need to see for myself what's happening." "You mean, take the submarine out there again?" I asked. "I mean, sure, we can do that eventually. But the ROV will give us a lot more useful data. We can capture one of the smaller specimens feeding on the whale, so we can test it for parasites or disease." Demetriou and Barden were nodding along with this. But Reynolds had turned her head away, at an obstinate angle, a muscle in her jaw twitching savagely. "Look," I said, "our last expedition was barely 2 weeks ago. I doubt that anything will have come about since then that's even visible to the naked eye." Reynolds drummed her right hand on a nearby desk. "We could dive down to it," she said. "The water is shallow enough." "Not a good idea," said Barden. "There are sharks and other predators feeding on the whale that might turn on us if they feel like it. I mean, I've dived with sharks before, but it's not something I'd recommend outright. They're unpredictable. Besides, we could end up disturbing the other scavengers, disrupting the natural process. It'll alter our findings." Reynolds got up from her chair and began to pace the laboratory, Barden watching her with a pensive disquiet. "No dive," I said. "If Demetriou is right, then it's really not safe to get that close to the whale even in protective gear. It's better to be safe than sorry. You know that?" Watching Reynolds' stubborn face twist, I felt a tug of unease, unable to understand why she was so set on the idea when she knew better. "Fine," she said. "No dive." She went out through the laboratory door, letting it bang shut in the frame behind her. Barden flinched and laughed shakily. "Yikes," he said. "What's going on with her?" "She's obsessed," said Demetriou. Her lip curled. "She's barely taken a break since we started. Skips meals. Doesn't sleep. If you ask me, it's not about the work at all." "Do you mean?" I asked. "You're thinking mental health stuff. Family issues." Demetriou shrugged. "I don't know, but it's something. The other night, she was talking about the whale song we've been hearing on our last few trips, saying she thinks it's connected to the fall. It makes no sense, obviously. You'd better keep an eye on her, Heaney. You know her better than the rest of us." I sighed, aware of the accusation in Demetriou's voice. "She's your problem." She meant not ours. If there was something wrong, then she would have told me, I said. "Reynolds isn't really one for keeping secrets. I think it's just the study. How odd it all is. I can't blame her for being a bit unsettled. I am too. If there is an infectious disease or parasite situation going on down there, we'll need outside help. She doesn't think that's what it is, though," said Demetriou. "You heard her. She thinks that the whale's still alive somehow. You can't tell me that's a normal way of thinking." She looked at me in an almost suspicious fashion, as though she believed that I was implicit in covering up some secret. "I'm sure she's just tired and a bit paranoid, like the rest of us," I said. "Let's just leave this for now. We'll send Mercutio out in the next few days. Is that okay?" Mercutio was our ROV, piloted mainly by Demetriou, who had a background in engineering. "Fine by me," she said, relenting slightly. "But I'm not the problem, remember? By midweek, we'd set out in RV Sylvia, the team's research vessel, from which we were to direct Mercutio towards the whale fall. The entire team was restless with nerves and excitement, as we always were when on the verge of some discovery. I caught Demetriou casting Reynolds' disparaging looks across the control deck and shook my head at her prior to setting out on our venture. I'd pulled Demetriou aside again. "Behave yourself today. We'll be recording the expedition, and besides, there will be other crew members aboard to make sure everything runs smoothly. I don't want to make a bad impression. They already think we're all going a bit mad cooped up on our own out here in the facility." Demetriou had snorted at this and shuffled her shoulder out from under my hand. "Say that to Reynolds. Not me. She'll be the one that embarrasses us all. She's still talking about that insane theory, you know. I'll talk to her," I said irritably. "But you need to concentrate on your job and not this pointless conflict. You've had a problem with Reynolds for months, since before any of this started, and I'm getting sick of it, Ria. Remember what's important. Reynolds, for her part, remained quiet as the vessel sailed out from the research center and lowered Mercutio down into the water. She sat watching the control room monitors as the ROV's surroundings filled the screen, leaning forwards with her chin on her fist. As the dead whale Titus came into view, corpse boiled with feasting animals, and more circled at a distance, deciding their place on the body. I still don't understand how they don't starve to death, said Barden suddenly. At least some of them should have, you'd think, some kind of symbiotic relationship, I'd guess, said Demetria, turning Mercutio slightly to the left. The scavengers will survive until the parasites inside the whale drain them of all nutrition. After that, they'll die, fall away, and be replaced by the others attracted to the body. Pretty clever place to hide if you think about it. Lots of live food around. Demetrio talked with a brash confidence I didn't quite believe in. I could see the stiff set of her wiry body, the way her left eyelid had begun to twitch at random intervals. She was as lost as any of us in all this. But it comforted her to pretend that she knew better, that we were all fools not to understand it as she did. All fell silent as we crowded around the monitors, Mercutio's leisurely approach expanding the image of the whale fall. Titus lay like a drunken giant in that orgy of feasting, the one untouched eye gazing up at the camera, as though inviting us to join in that revelry. Some of the smaller animals had begun to look noticeably fragile, and it struck me that in the time we'd taken to prepare for our venture, whatever was in the whale had begun to feed with more rapidity than before. Reynolds was muttering something I couldn't quite discern over the chatter of the others in the room. Going to try and get close enough to collect the samples now, said Demetrio. Maybe from 2 different places. What's left of the meat still on the ribcage and the areas where the scavengers are swarming now. They might give us different results. Reynolds twitched at this, but didn't speak, and I wondered what she was thinking. Did she really imagine that the whale had materialized this way, at the bottom of the ocean, that it was some other entity that merely resembled a whale by chance or cunning evolution? Reynolds had always had a fascination with the unexplored quarters of the sea. What lurked in the trenches too far down to probe, without diver or vessel being crushed by the incredible pressures of the deep? We had studied as novices together. She dreamt of stumbling across one of the lurking ancients depicted in sailors' mythology, the first of the modern world to catch a glimpse of them, and thus prove their existence. Likely, it was this long-held fantasy that had led her to see Titus as such a creature. If indeed that was her belief, I observed her with a new fascination, trying to interpret her slightest move or expression, and never quite understanding what I saw. On the monitors, Mercutio had extended its mechanical arms to gather the first cross-section of meat from the fall. Demetrio narrowed an eye in concentration, withdrawing the manipulator back into the vehicle so as to place the sample into storage. Around it, the scavengers stirred, seemingly aware of the interloper. "They're curious," said Barden. "That's something." We all knew what he meant, having each had the same unspoken worry that the animals would have no response to stimulus, no more than growths on the flesh. They did not detach themselves from the whale to follow the robot, only watched as it traversed to their side of the body. "All right," said Demetrio. "Let's go again. After you do that, see if you can pick up one of the crabs I suggested. They're small enough to transport." It was as I said this that a pair of tiger sharks that had been circling the whale turned sharply in towards Mercutio and snapped at it, ripping at the foam on its frame. "Stop moving it," I said. "They'll probably lose interest." Demetrio obeyed, but the sharks persisted their attacks. Not the idle interest of animals encountering a foreign object, but those with intent to kill. "They're defending the whale," said Reynolds, suddenly. "They know about us. Titus knows." "Don't say that," said Barden. "That's ridiculous. I could tell by The way he was tugging the zip of his jacket up and down, that he was nerve at his eyes, tracked the other animals surrounding the fall, as though beginning to interpret their activity as Reynolds did. "Shit," said Demetrio. "I better get Mercutio out of there. We'll have to come back again another time, or we'll lose what we have already." I watched tensely. As the ROV withdrew from the body of the whale, only 1 out of 3 samples collected its sides, buffeted by the attempts of the sharks to tear it to pieces. My gaze was drawn down to the eye of the fallen Titus, the black alien globe seeming full of a paradoxical vitality. And I shuddered, glancing away from it. "You hear that?" said Reynolds, into the quiet. "What's that?" snapped Demetrio. "I don't need to be distracted now." Yet I saw her head twitch slightly, as if turning her ear to some subtle noise in the air. Barden and Reynolds exchanged looks, and suddenly I saw them united, both in tune to the same sound. "What am I supposed to be listening for?" I asked. But then I heard it too, a faint but definite whale song. Every face in that room registered a like recognition. And suddenly I realized the danger of it, wondering how we'd all been led so rapidly into aligning ourselves with Reynolds' frenzy. "Let's not overthink it," I said. "It's the same school of whales we've seen in the area for ages." "Demetrio, how are we doing?" "We're almost out," she said. "Somebody better tell the crew we want to go back to shore." Barden stood nearly tripping over his seat. "I will." He couldn't seem to stand, looking at the monitors, shielding his eyes with one raised hand as he scurried out of the room. We were all glad when the screens went off, except for Reynolds, who went across to the glass and touched it, as though she might feel the whale through the surface. Demetrio rounded on me, her expression thunderous. "Don't!" I mouthed. "Not now." Once we were safely back at the facility, I whisked Reynolds away and sat her down in one of the offices. "Diana?" I said. "What's going on? You're scaring everyone with all this stuff about Titus. Putting ideas into people's heads that shouldn't be there." She shrugged, sullen and unmoved. "Demetrio's right," I went on. "We need to reach out to disease control. There's something infectious coming off. That whale we've all come into contact with samples the water and the air nearby. I don't know how it's transmitted, but something is extremely wrong, but not in the way you think it is. What you're saying about the whale itself being alive and doing all this, it is impossible. I wouldn't say." That said Reynolds. "We don't know enough about the sea to know that it isn't a new organism. Who's to say that this whale or this species that looks like one isn't mimicking a major food source to call animals to it and provide itself with nutrients? There's not much proof of that yet," I said. "Though I suppose it's a possibility. But the way you talk about it all makes it sound like there's something else you think is happening here. Something, well, I don't know. Irrational anyway." Reynolds fidgeted. "Not necessarily," she said. "I've had this hunch since all this started. They just don't want to admit it. I think the whale wants things to be part of it for other reasons than eating. Like anglerfish fusing during mating to ensure that they can breed when mates are scarce, but rather than breeding, the whale wants to expand itself. Just one organism made of many growing its territory. And this is intentional, you think?" "Instinctual, definitely. Intentional, maybe. Whales are intelligent. Why couldn't whatever Titus be as well?" Closed my eyes, feeling all the sleep I'd lost through the project catching up with me. I don't know what's worse. The thought that the fall knows what it's doing, or that it's just doing it as a survival mechanism. Not that I even hold with this theory, obviously, I added rapidly. I'm more inclined to think Demetrio has it right. Just try not to fixate on this too much, or I swear you two will end up killing each other. I spent the next 4 days writing reports and drafting up potential messages to send out if the results of some infection were indeed found in the whale's remains. It was the other members of the team that studied the sample we'd brought up from the ocean, scrutinizing it under microscopes and carrying out as many tests and examinations as the tiny shred of flesh could endure. All the while, Demetrio and Reynolds argued over their findings as bitterly as past lovers. while Barden timidly attempted to mediate. I should have intervened. I don't know why I didn't. After that last visit to Titus, I'd been taken up with a strange, lethargic melancholy, prone to spending any breaks from my work on incessant walks along the tattered border of shoreline beyond the facility. There I listened to the song of the whales that seemed always to circle us now, or else to the call of the one we called Titus, if Reynolds was to be believed. I felt a longing for something I couldn't quite describe, a loneliness that my team no longer satisfied, particularly now that they'd grown close in a way I found myself unable to penetrate. Only when early one morning I was roused by Demetriou shaking me in my bed did it occur to me that I'd missed the touch of another's flesh upon mine. Though not in this way, I sensed, but one closer, more intimate than that. "Reynolds and Barden are gone," said Demetriou. "They've taken a boat and some of the diving gear with them. They carried off the sample with them as well." I slapped at both of my cheeks sharply in an attempt to rouse myself. "What?" I said. "Why on earth would they do that?" Demetriou's eyes shifted guiltily aside. "There was a fight last night. The same thing we've been bickering about for days. The tissue we took from the whale, it's impossible, but our test showed that it was from a still living animal." I said that there must be a mistake, and Reynolds shouted that I was lying to myself, and that I knew the same thing she did. Don't remember much of what was said after that. We'd been drinking. There was some pushing each other, Barden getting in the middle as usual. But then he was on her side, saying I had to see it all now, and that I should stop struggling all the time. He said it very calmly, like he was trying to make me understand, but I was so annoyed that I told him to shut up and went to bed. Then, this morning, they were both gone. Clearly, they're going to dive to the fall. Horror clapped my throat shut, and for a second, I only looked about me, wondering how I'd let my team slip into chaos within just a handful of days. "Cuscio's still in a repair," I said. "We'll have to take the backup ROV out with us. There's no way we're going down there ourselves, not even on a sub." I think that's how this happened. We've always gotten too close. After informing the relevant authorities as to what we'd suspected to have happened to Demetriou, myself, and a crew of sleepy-eyed and bewildered mariners boarded the RV Sylvia on an emergency expedition. It was dangerous for us to have taken even this measure, I suspected. But I had to see, with my own eyes, what had happened to my team, to confirm the theory that had eaten through us all like rot. Found the boat Reynolds and Barden had stolen, floating to the right of the area in which Titus was situated, unmanned and obviously abandoned. The deck was dry, implying that neither member of the team had returned to it even once from their dive. "Idiots," muttered Demetria, though she was grey and shaking. There was no need to sacrifice themselves for this. Just to prove a point. I placed a hand on her damp shoulder. Her sweat had the same salt scent as the sea. "I don't think that's entirely why they did it," I said. "I don't think you do either. You've felt it, haven't you? Something you can't explain calling you out here down there?" Demetriou didn't reply, only stared at the empty boat drifting beside us. "You have," I said. "Just like I have, like they did. You've just been trying to ignore it." They couldn't. I drew Demetriou away from the water, fearing that one of us would succumb to the same urge to pitch over the side of the vessel that had taken our companions. "Let's go down to control," I said. "Let's see what's happened." I and a few curious members of the crew stood watching tensely as Demetriou sunk the backup ROV into the depths with an uncharacteristic reluctance. The black shape of the whale fall filled the monitors. Then gradually, the details of its mutilated flesh and those that fed upon it Reynolds and Barden were amongst those animals. Their regulators torn free and cast aside, so as to sink their teeth into the whale's hide as best they could. Their limbs kicked lightly at the water, signaling the impossible life that was still in them. Despite the absence of air left in their lungs, Mother of Jesus, said one of the mariners standing behind me. "What the hell is happening?" "Get closer," I said to Demetrio. "I need to see their faces." In silence, she obeyed, maneuvering the ROV until Reynolds and Barden's eyes shifted up to the camera in unison, each dull, lacking in their natural character, and yet compelled by some reflex of enduring vitality that was perhaps not their own. As the ROV turned this way, then that I saw that the mouths of our lost crew, like those of the scavengers around them, had grown into the flesh on which they feasted, fused with the great whale. All of them one. The eye of the fallen Titus watched us withdraw, and before the monitors shut off, I swear I saw it move. What happened after that, I can describe only vaguely, being that myself. Demetrio and the crew of the RV, Sylvia, were all placed in urgent quarantine by government forces the moment we stepped foot on land. We were aware of the area being closed off to the public air and sea crafts of endless variety swarming the waters at a safe distance from the fall. Presumably, the whale was contained, and will likely be destroyed when the means doing so, without spreading any hypothetical infection, have been determined by the relevant experts. Reynolds and Barden are considered legally dead, a fact one of the doctors on this lonely ward confided in me through pity, I suspect. I don't believe any of the government scientists understand what we discovered in the ocean, and perhaps only those joined with the whale fall ever could, with any true clarity. The experts only know enough of its effects and their contagion to have separated my colleagues and I from one another in a guarded hospital somewhere very far inland. This done to protect, isolate, and most importantly to study us. We few touched by the whale's influence to have survived. How long they intend to keep us here, I do not know, nor will my keepers tell me. Perhaps when the whale is no more than an account guarded and concealed from public knowledge, having been blown apart by military explosives or brought up to the surface to burn. When this occurs, I wonder if I will know if I'll sense it in the end of my connection with the whale, or if, like the after effects of illness, my experience will go on, my mind and sense of self ever altered by it. I still hear whale song frequently, likely only hallucination now, and yet it's real enough to me. I question if the other survivors in their separate rooms hear it as I do the call to go down to it, summoning the water in my body and the salt in my blood. Don't know how much longer I could have resisted on the outs.